this thing. And don't worry, we'll just get rid of all of this in post. Is typically the cold open. Although sadly, it's not cold anymore. Now it's very hot, and I'm sweating in my house, which is disgusting.
That sounds terrible. That was just terrible. I completely zoned out. I'm glad we're doing this not live. You know what I'm saying?
And we'll definitely, don't worry, I'll definitely leave all of it in, and the people will see all of this because we got to humanize ourselves. That's the power of the podcast.
That's fine. That's fine. So I do. Are we? God damn it! Are we telling what we do here? Are we? Did I skip that part? It's Monday, bro. It's a bad day to do this. Anyway, all right.
All right, everybody, and welcome. Hello. This is something that we're trying to make happen a little bit more regularly, at least once per season. But welcome to the State of the Necromancer for Diablo 4, as brought to you by the boys over at MacroBioBoi. My name is MacroBioBoi. Got my face up here. We also have LordxSaura, our absolutely fantastic. I'll learn how to point. We have LordxSaura, absolutely fantastic guy right here, as well as Serok. So, LordxSaura, if you wouldn't mind starting the people off, getting ourselves an introduction. What are you working on? What guides do you do? And what should they know about you?
Sure. LordxSaura, I just go by Saura, but wasn't available. So here we are, LordxSaura, writing Necromancer guides since expansion. Been writing the Bloodwave, Shadow Bloodwave guide, Bloodlands, Blood Surge, Rest in Peace, Soul Rift. Maybe it'll come back at some point. But those are the guides I'm working on. Max Roll, been super fun. I am a researcher for a tech company during the day, and then just try to play as much as D4 and create for the community.
It's honestly insane how much you play this game. Like, I'll get done streaming, my eyes will be bleeding, and I'll look over and you're like, hey, just got my triple GA on the unique I need. I'm like, when does this guy find time to play? All right, moving on. I'll learn how to point. And my boy Serok, tell the people who you are.
Hey guys, I'm Serok. I've been Necromancer since day one. It's my favorite class pretty much in every game I play. I currently write our minion builds, our Bone Spear builds, and our Bone Spirit build.
Yeah, so we got LordxSaura over on the bloody builds. We got Serok on all of the bony builds, even if the bones have to run around and miss things half the time. And then I guess I also do stuff too. I don't know. I mostly just oversee these guys, pester them when I think we could be optimizing a build a little bit. And I technically write all of the darkness builds too. But just learning who we are is not necessarily what you're here for. We want to talk about the Necromancer in season 8. And I think probably one of the best jumping off points is just kind of talk about, one, what were we excited about walking into this season and whether or not we got that thing. So, Saura, as far as like, what do you think the number one thing we were excited for was, and do you think we really got that delivered to us?
I'm not sure if we got it, but I was happy that Bone Spear got all the bugs fixed and actually became the full potential, the best build for Necromancer.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, my lovely Bloodwave hasn't been gutted. It definitely deserved all the nerfs, and it stayed still viable. So that was actually, I'm excited to continue playing the build. It kind of got boring when it was too strong, and actually like you were one-shotting everything. But when it's in a fair state, it is actually a bit more fun to play now because there's actually a challenge in the game.
Yeah, if you've been following Bloodwave, you know, the build last season that kind of defined the meta for the Necromancer. LordxSaura's ridiculous amounts of time put in when everybody else is sleeping is the reason why it's as optimized as it is right now in the meta. Although you jumped on the thing that Serok is almost certainly the most excited about. Indira's memory is fixed. Bone Spear mostly works with everything. Serok, how has been piloting Blood Spear in this season now that it's like finally a real build?
Oh, it's been fantastic. I mean, I was an OG Bone Spear in season 0, did some fun stuff with it then, and you know, when it got gutted, it just took one of the most iconic Necro builds away from us. So, you know, we touched on it last season, but there was a lot of bugs that really just hindered its gameplay. And so, you know, going into the season, the most excited was when we got those, you know, patch notes like Bone Spears fixed, and we're like, yeah, let's get in it.
Yeah, it was just like down in the bug fixes. We're like, wait, hold on. Bone Spear is a real build again.
Fixed. Right. You know, and that being said, though, we did walk into the season and there was some unannounced changes as well. And, you know, up front, they, you know, really didn't feel that great for the early process because we did abuse a lot of the echoes. Like we were getting a lot of damage out of those, and, you know, not being able to scale fully in the same way. It really did change the gameplay itself. But once we tweaked it a little bit and got into, you know, the end game where we had the gear to make, you know, focusing on Bone Spear itself work, it was an incredible build. It's felt great. The biggest thing for it is it does overheal what you're spending.
Hmm.
So, when you're fully optimized, it feels great. It pilots real well. And it really came back to its original, season zero, power. Even though the gameplay is completely different, having to use Bone Prison, it's a different gameplay. It's a complete unique style from what it was. It is definitely in a great place,
Yeah.
and it does feel good.
There's something, typically when somebody looks at like the best build, which we can argue that Bone Spear is the best build, will probably end up like maybe 1 to 2 tiers above Bloodwave. Maybe they'll continue to stay neck and neck. It kind of comes down to what kind of gear people can get their hands on, which I think is very healthy. 2 different builds battling for the top spot is probably where the majority of classes want to be. But there's something about the progression of Blood Spear throughout you getting the gear pieces and slowly putting it together, like putting together your Megazord of, you get the pants, but that's not enough. And then you get Deathless, and that's not enough. And then you start to be able to manage your resources and your healing. And now all of a sudden you have the aspects. And it has a really, really good progression point from like starting off level 1 all the way up into the end game, which I really like. And I kind of hope that more of our Necro builds can kind of follow suit with that. Probably one of the biggest things that people had a gripe with was the Bloodwave pants. Like, you put them on and you blew up everything. It turns out it still took a lot to be able to get to, tier 150. It still took a couple weeks to get to that optimized point. But from the jump, it was a little bit too strong. But this one is like perfect. Unlike the other thing that we were kind of excited about, or at least I would say a lot of the player base was excited about, was our Sanguivore Blade of Zir, the quote unquote minion blade.
Minion blade.
And
yep.
I don't like to throw the devs under the bus whenever we can avoid it, because oddly enough, we're all people. They sold it as a minion sword. It's just not a minion sword. It's for Army of the Dead. And for Army of the Dead, best sword you can put on. But even with the buffs that kind of came to it, which was, just some additive damage on top, I think that kind of really missed the mark. And sadly, the Necromancer class had to kind of just take another unique item and throw it on the pile of, I wish this wouldn't drop from bosses. We get into the season. We've now been playing it for over 3 weeks at this point. LordxSaura has actually been playing it for about 5 weeks. That's just what happens when you play for 12 hours a day, even when you're at work. But now that we're at this point, what has been your favorite build to play? And of the builds that you've tried, have you really run into any issues, or does it kind of feel like Necro's in a good place? I guess, Serok, we'll start with you. We'll kind of switch it up here.
I do think it's in a good spot. I think Necro's been in a great spot for many seasons, especially this season, because like I said, we've got 2 top contending builds, and that feels great. I do think in terms of the power itself, we still have a lot of builds that are really lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those builds, shouldn't be in the position they're in. Like Bloodlance I was really excited about Bloodlance because it outperformed last season. There was rumors that we're going to get some fixes to the overall damage for it, but it really just it stalled out, and I think that's been probably the biggest letdown of the season for me was Bloodlance. But I think the most fun I've had, though, is oddly enough has been minions this season. There's always, I'm not a minion guy. I've always made a build because it's so desired, but I've never been to like, I play minions. But I did enjoy them this season. They've always felt consistent. I've said this so many times. They're definitely Necromancer's most consistent build, and they have been for so many seasons. It's the one build we have that can say, this does every bit of content well. Blood Spear and Blood Wave, they do pits and bosses really well, but everything else they're kind of just like okay at. But minions excel in all of it. So, with the minions themselves felt really good this season. I've enjoyed playing them. I've enjoyed building them out. I think we've had a lot of fun with some of the bugs trying to work around them. But overall, I have
when's
had fun
there a
with
season without bugs, honestly, on the minions?
Right.
That's probably my biggest gripe with it. It's we kind of can't be sure that everything's gonna work, and we're doing our best to report stuff. The devs are doing the best to work on stuff. Like they're constantly, and they're just like asking us for feedback, asking us for videos, and asking us for like, can you send data? And so apparently it's just like hard to figure out. I don't know. I'm not a game dev. I'm not about to pretend like I know what they're doing. But how many builds have you actually played? Like, can you list off all the builds where you've like at least like 8 out of 12 masterworked, tried to play to the end game? Because I think maybe not everybody like has a great idea of how many builds we play per day, basically.
Yeah, so this season, and I have slacked off a little bit this season just simply because of match working maths. But this season, I started out playing minions to level, jumped straight into Bone Sphere. Then I went to Bloodlance to test it out. Then I went into Blight. Then I played with Blight with the Varshan mechanic, played around with
Yeah.
it. And then I switched into full blown minions, and that's where I'm at now.
So
And we're
that's
2
6
weeks into the
builds.
season. Yep.
6 builds. Awesome. So Saura, basically same question. What's been your most, favorite to play? Or any like kind of big things you weren't expecting or things you've kind of come across? And then literally, how many builds have you built out?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously my favorite build to play is Bloodwave, has always been since like season 0, even when it was even like a Shadow Surfer. It was actually a dot-based desecrated ground build.
Yeah, that
That's
was like,
that,
it was really fun finding out that could even really do anything. And then they fixed the desecrated ground. You're like, oh yeah, this is going to be awesome. And now there's no reason to touch it.
right,
Just kind of
right.
sad.
It was actually funny because it was so good in PvP too. It's like a little bit side fun thing. It was like a very fun build to play there. So then I played in AOZ and stuff, so it was always a fun build. And I love playing ultimate builds. Like it's just something about doing like big damage with your ultimate is feels very impactful for me. I don't like very like spammy builds. So just hitting that one big button and kind of watching screens blow up is quite fun. Sort of just like kind of spamming the same damage dealing button. So that's why Bloodwave has always been my favorite build. So which is I put tons of hours into it every season, either meta or not. And last season I actually only played Bloodwave and Blood Surge because kind of there was no point of playing anything else for the most part. It was just too strong. Everything else felt so bleak.
We're not going to talk about that. All right. We're in season 8 now, Saura. This is where we're at.
Yeah. Well, this season, I'm a little bit more monogamous, I guess. I've been playing more Bloodwave, been farming with Blood Surge, and recently I've been actually playing some Solar Rift. I think it might make a little comeback. Not as good of a comeback, but a little comeback.
Yeah, boss powers to kind of cycle emptying resource and gen resource, right? That's kind of the idea.
Right.
And it's easier to snapshot on it's easier to actually get like the benefits of the overpower, right? Like how is that working?
Yeah, well, shout out to Vineka on this one as well. He's been really like sending me messages every day, so I want to give him a shout out there. But it's actually much easier to play. Like you used to watch you gotta do the empty tendrils thing, the snapshot hit at the exact moment, and you have to like pay attention to your buff bar very carefully. But now actually you just kind of spam. It feels like it kind of plays like Blood Surge. You just activate your resource and you use the Puck rune and you just overpower 35% of the time because of the cooldown. So obviously DPS is not as much, but it's much easier to play, and I think it's great for like farming and stuff. It just feels like Blood Surge.
So as far as myself, like favorite build that I've been playing, it's kind of a little bit up in the air. I really, really loved Blood Spear. I thought it was so fun trying to figure out like, oh, okay, well, we figured out how to make it do the pit. Can we make it do better speed farming damage? And then you mess around with enough stuff. Like I'm using plunging darkness and void aspect to kind of create a fake tendrils. And I don't know, there was something very, very satisfying about having a whole new build to dive into, which luckily for the Necromancer, I feel like nowadays we pretty often have like one new build to really dive into and everybody to kind of smack their heads against and figure out how to make it the best. I think that's one of the cool parts about the Necro community is that like basically everybody is in everybody else's DMs being like, ooh, I tried this. Have you tried that? Or what about this thing? And I swapped over to just this boss power. But as far as builds that I've fully built out and played at this point, it has been, I also started on minions. Oddly enough, minions are just very good to start off on. Built into Blood Spear. Then I messed around with Bloodwave just a little bit, just to kind of make sure like things were working the way that things are supposed to be working, because you kind of don't know sometimes. I built out Sever, I built out Blight, I built out Minions, I built out Bone Storm, which actually might be one of our better speed farming builds, as long as you're willing to watch your buff bar, which is kind of funny to think about. an Army of the Dead, trying to give it like a fair shot. So that's seven builds I've managed to build out. I have a couple more that I want to investigate. Obviously, like, got to go look at Bloodlands and figure out whether or not everybody saying it's terrible is true, and I believe them. But you have to be able to kind of derive your own truth about a thing. I think I've been having a lot of fun with this season. I think the seasonal mechanic was like cool enough. It's kind of funny. You do it enough to get the regular boss powers, and then you kind of just ignore it completely. You just go kill regular bosses. So definitely a bit of a letdown from last season, where I feel like the witch powers and the witch content kind of felt like a lot more consuming. You were kind of just doing it a lot more. Whether or not that's good for people, it's kind of a different question. But I do think that the boss ladder is a bit better. I am still just killing 500 Belials to be able to get my gear, so that's probably a bit of an issue. But
right.
As far as those things go, yeah, how have we felt about the season itself?
Well, I think this season, like the boss powers themselves it's like you said. I mean, it kind of was a little lacking even compared to the witch powers. The thing with it is, we've been talking about for the past few seasons how it's just running bosses over and over, and that is the legit end game.
Mm-hmm.
And they made a season where we ran bosses. So we went from that being our content to that being our content. The one thing, the boss slider itself is great.
Yes,
The new way
so
they've
much
done the
better.
boss, having the fact that you can't just go and sell runs and dump millions of mats, and you still can when you farm them, but it's a much more it's just a true ladder. You're going from one tier of these bosses, getting your mats, going to the next tier. But to the end game piece, once you're there, it's nothing but Belial. There's no reason to run anything else. You can, target farm those specific bosses by running Belial. So there's really no point once you get to end game. And then we got down to the season where you run Duriel every day, all day for the past 2 seasons, and now we're running Belial all day, every day. And it led to just the same exact season progression of this is where we're at now, because there's no true, it's the best way to get your mats. It's the best way to get your uniques. It's the best way to get gold. Like there's no content that tells you to go play it, rather than once you get your gear set up, you just run bosses.
Yeah. Bosses and masterworking. Those are like the two things you do, and then you dump it all into the pit, and then you cry when you get a bad boss at the end. But I do agree that like the boss ladder itself, the structure of that is a better experience. Maybe not for minions, because the second tier bosses just wipe out your minions and you can't get them to attack anything, which is probably like the biggest complaint I've seen out of people. They're like, how am I supposed to kill Duriel? He automatically kills all my skeletons. How am I supposed to kill Andariel? They won't go fight the thing. How am I supposed to kill these portals? Literally, my minions won't attack them. So, maybe we'll have a little minion discussion in a quick second. But what about you, Saura? As far as like, yeah, sure, we're still just killing an uber boss, but how has killing that uber boss a couple hundred times felt in this season?
It's my least favorite thing to do, sadly. Like every season, I mean, it's been the way. When they announced actually the boss rework, I had a little bit different expectation. Like I was expecting that we're gonna see Belial less, and when we see him, it's gonna matter so much more. Like it's gonna be a really tough fight, and then the drop rates is gonna be super high. Like coming from an MMO perspective, like playing World of Warcraft and over the years and stuff, is like you get to see that one boss not all the time, and when you do, like it feels exciting and memorable. And when you kill the boss, you get like usually a very very good loot, and it's like it feels something. So that's kind of what I was expecting with the Belial, but it kind of went back to being one shotting and farming. The first week was really fun. Like when everybody's figuring out the bosses and people like friends list, hey, can you come kill Belial? I heard you're playing Bloodwave. You know, it's like grouping up, and then actually it being a challenge is fun. But then it kind of like went back to being the same. Maybe this was intended. Maybe it wasn't intended. But I remember, from the campfire chat, they were saying kind of that they want us to see the bosses less. Like they don't want us to chain bosses, and then when we kill them, it's gonna feel more meaningful. So I feel like that kind of fell short a little bit for me.
The idea. So in part of this, there's a little bit of a disconnect between maybe our experience and the more casual player playing the game,
True.
where They fight some bosses, they get some of the materials, maybe they do some tributes, you know, they get some more materials, and then they work their way up through the ladder. We have a much more accelerated point where, due to the fact that there are just dupes always in the game, right? And that means that the trade market on like Diablo.trade just gets flooded with materials. It was what, like day 3 or day 4, and we were just buying like 1,000 Belial materials for a couple billion gold because that's how it works. I will say that the boss fights have never felt better when you are at the gear level before you get your gear from the bosses.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said about the fact that it's so funny. People like, the boss fights aren't hard and I just trivialize it all and I'm just doing it all on 4-player Torment 4. I'm like, yeah, man, but did you try it before you had gear from bosses? Like, did you go fight Grigor and learn the new mechanics and die 15 times because now they put the lightning around the outer edge? And then did you go do the Harbinger fight that actually like has mechanics? You get to like Kamehameha the portals. And then the first time you walked into Belial and you actually had to like dodge his breath attack and jump behind the eyes and all of that. I feel like they made really good bosses for before you have boss gear. And then the progression to trivializing bosses is also good. It's just I still spent like 30 to 40 hours just killing bosses. And that can't be it. Like, that just can't be what we do. I can't do that for another season and be like, I feel like I've had a fulfilling 30 hours of gameplay this season. Like, it's got to be different. I don't know what different necessarily looks like, but maybe unique items shouldn't be the best item in the game. Maybe everybody jumps on my bandwagon. Maybe unique shouldn't be the best item, but should just be an alternative to how the build works. Hear me out here. Don't need to run a boss 50 times.
I'm with you on that. When we had the season that they introduced Masterworking, you know, they came out and said, we want you to focus more on legendary aspects. And then 3 months later, they have another season that said, actually, we want you all to focus on having 5+ aspect or uniques in your build. So we went from going to, yeah, let's run these unique or legendary aspects to just kidding. We're actually going to focus on uniques now. So, you know, I think there was much more build diversity when we didn't have an item like Shroud of False Death. We didn't have Perdition where
to go.
Yeah. And so you have these defensive slot items where previously you had to run defensive aspects, and you suddenly drop in a 50% multiplier, and then you get 15 different free passives. Like, it's just it completely reduces the ability to customize a build and have unique builds.
At least, like, so we got like this one little patch. It was a little baby patch for Necro. You know, a lot of people said it was kind of a small patch. I was kind of expecting more turbulence as far as balancing walking into this season, because they kind of came out with a whole new ideology. Hey, we're going to respond to outliers immediately. You know, we're not going to leave things around. And they did, right? The Varshan power. They were made aware of it over that weekend. We already kind of knew they were going to be fixing it. We didn't have an exact date. They got it into the patch. As far as I'm concerned, that's a massive W. Obviously, everybody was upset, though, because their toy got taken away. What's kind of funny, though, is other than the Sork weirdly snapshotting, like 1 in every 33 runs, have there really been, like, ridiculous outliers as far as power or bugs? Obviously, like, Death Trap Rogue is, like, you know, somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe they just got lucky with it, but like, I don't think they really had a lot to touch. Like, did you expect any builds to actually get changed that weren't, or maybe something more coming out of that first patch? Saura?
Ignoring all the underperforming builds, like talking about the top end, I was actually quite impressed how they fine-tuned a lot of it. Like, even talking about Bone Spear, right? They kind of, it wasn't communicated in the patch notes, but they changed the helmet. And it turned out to be a good change maybe now, because then Bone Spear now maybe would be doing 116, which would be, you know, kind of becoming an outlier if it ignored the snapshotting Sork. So I feel like they did a pretty good job in terms of, like, you know, fine-tuning these top-end builds. And this is the first season since expansion. We don't have, like, a crazy build that's goes, you know...
Yeah, like, the only thing anybody is playing. Like, I think people are still playing Death Trap just because it moves at the speed of lightning and, like, it is very powerful. So there's probably like a bit of a slide there. Also, Earthquake Barb is just kind of always good because it hits the whole screen. Balance is good. Like the Spiritborn is a little bit weak, right? A little bit weak. But most builds are in the B to S tier. Most builds are doing 80 plus. Few builds are doing over 105. Other than the Sorc, like everything's kind of within like a 10 to 15 tier range. And I know a lot of people don't accept 10 to 15 tiers as a reasonable range, but like at some point you just have to understand that like the game needs to have kind of a very healthy ecosystem of balance, and it's not just everything needs to do 150.
Right, but that right there is the point. Like last season, we went from builds that were doing 150 with ease, and then we had builds doing 90s.
Right.
So going from a discrepancy of 15, maybe 20 at max, going from 60 is a substantial bone. Like it's a substantially in the right direction for balance of this game. And if you look at the leaderboards, the air quote, leaderboards, it's all consistent across the boards except for the outlying overpowered Sorc. Like it's all within a couple of pit tiers for which build for each class is their number one. So, people may not like the 10, like you said, but this is in such a better spot than it was last season.
Yeah, for sure. Every competent build can get into World Tier 4 if you really want to. If you understand how the numbers work together and you click the buttons right, you can be in World Tier 4. That means you're at least doing, somewhere around like probably like 75 is where like homebrew builds probably start falling off, maybe like 70, 75 in the pit. But even that, like you're mostly leveling up your glyphs all the way. I don't know. I feel like for the season where they're like, we're going to respond to everything right away, this is the least they've had to. And that's a good sign. Sorry, did you have something to add to that? I kind of cut you off there.
Yeah, I was gonna say on the like little bit of a counter argument though, they kind of changed the pit scaling too. Like in fact, actually, right now the Sorc is hitting about the same numbers as Bloodwaves was hitting last season. So like, I mean, the pit tiers look a little bit more squashed because of the scaling, but still, I think it's like the best it has ever been in terms of like the top end. But the Sorc, like outside of Sorc being 121, I think right now, which is kind of similar to last season's 150. So the scaling makes that look a bit different.
Sure. Yeah, and obviously it's important for people to know, in case they weren't aware. Yes, pit scaling has gone up. I'm not sure that we've really divined the exact number. It's somewhere between 16.5 and 19.8%, somewhere in between these two numbers. But basically, to do 5 pit tiers higher, you basically have to double your damage. That's roughly how the math plays out. What build right now do you think is missing something, and can you define what that thing is? Like, what are you most hopeful to see in the future?
For me, it's Shadow in general. I'm not on the same wavelength as you, Mac, on the Infinimist. I hated that build. I don't like the whole immunity factor. I do, however, think Shadow in general is such an underserviced. Underserviced is a good way to put it. We were nerfed with it when they did the Wither and Blighted nerf, and then we never got any compensation for it, even though we were supposed to. Giving the base damage increase to Blight did absolutely nothing for anybody because Blight itself doesn't do any damage. So if you're doubling 0, it's still 0. So for me, it's Shadow in general. I mean, we've gone from having where Shadow was arguably one of our best archetypes to where it is completely unusable if you're pushing pits or if you're wanting to do bosses. Sure, you can do bosses on Blight, but you're going to kill 10 of them by the time you kill one with other builds. So I think for me has been Shadow for multiple seasons. It's been about 9 months since it's been even looked at. And I think it's a very bad state for the Necromancer when our Shadow builds are only used for utility. Blight's used in every build to get a 20% multiplier. Blighted Corpse Explosion's used for both Flesh Eater and getting another Reaper's Pursuit multiplier. So when an entire archetype of a class is nothing more than utility, it doesn't feel great, especially for those that want to play that.
It's almost even worse. It's like it's not even utility. It is just, this gets us 3 more multis. Like if it was like that's how you manage your crowd control, and crowd controlling mattered in the game in a meaningful way, be like, okay, almost sure, yeah, like these skills are more like the support skills. Like D2 Necromancer had a whole tree of curses. Each curse did something awesome, but really you only use like 1 or 2 of them. But you could do stuff with them. That's just not the case for Shadow, right? It's just they output this minuscule amount of damage, and we can't turn them into blood skills. So it kind of doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm there with you.
And the other piece that I've got a big issue with is our ultimates. We have one ultimate build that performs, which is Bloodwave, and then we have Soul Rift. Now, of course, minions use their Kalins, but Shadow Blight doesn't exist anymore. Affliction is barely used. Bone Storm is not used unless, like you mentioned earlier, if you're watching all of your buffs to the second, it doesn't exist anymore. So we just don't have a big variety in what we can build out, just because of how powerful certain aspects of what Necromancer has become are.
What about you, Saura? What's the big outlier that you've been waiting on?
That's actually exactly what I was gonna say. I think it's like crime to have to run Affliction on a Shadow build when there's like a passive called Shadow Blight and you just look at it. Nah, I don't need it. This doesn't do anything. But it's called Shadow Blight. It's supposed to go on your Shadow build. But actually, for me, like I always play Necromancer as well in any game, and for a lot of people, that's Necromancer and minions. To me, it's always like the dark caster aspect of it that draws me into the class design, and then that's where I always love the shadow builds. I mean, I played Shadow Surfer because it was actually desecrated ground and doing the damage, and I actually like that aspect more. And I hope that shadow builds come back big time. It's very very soon. That's the main archetype that I enjoy in the class. And like Surak said it, Blight doesn't do damage. The Ebon Piercer does. I think Sever is good, but that's because it overpowers and its whole actually I like Shadow as a damage over time, not necessarily like a direct damage also.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be cool to be able to play a damage over time build again at some point.
Yeah, to add a little bit of context to that, right? Like I'm currently grinding out my glyphs on Blight. I did finally find the new, better boss power combination on Blight, so I'll get that updated soon, I promise. We're going back to Belial's Eye Beams. But I'm currently grinding out my glyphs to around 70-ish, so I can do a tier 90. Sever, because it can overpower, is doing tier 100. It's doing 4 times the amount of damage that Blight is doing. It's only saving graces that it can overpower. So other than just getting rid of overpower, maybe just getting rid of the fact that Rathmas says if you overpower, you do 2.2 times damage. That's the key passive, send tweet, which is kind of insane when you think about it. I think the thing that I would really like to highlight, or the thing that I'm most hopeful for, actually is based in itemization. I think the addition of the Temper skill does double damage ruined this game's ability to ever have a chance of you doing something interesting with a build. If your build can have a single affix that says you do double damage, that is the best way to build your build. And now nothing else on your build matters. It doesn't matter how strong your ultimate is. It doesn't matter how strong Corpse Explosion could get up to. If Bone Spear can do double damage, it will always do double the damage of that other skill. And a little bit of history for people who maybe forgot. Back before this game came out, there was this idea of the limiting resource. Literally, how much resource you could generate per second mattered. Most people had to use multiple aspects to be able to generate resource. When Bone Spear was first out, we were using Torment and Exposed Flesh, sometimes putting Torment on your amulet. You don't remember Torment? It says when you crit with the Bone skill, you gain percentage increase essence per second. That is how down bad we used to be on resources, which made Corpse Explosion incredibly impactful because you gained a second resource, which was if you kill a monster, that turns into a skill use. Nowadays, essence generation or resource generation as a whole is completely trivialized to the point where we use an aspect that drains our resource per second, and we use a rune that says eat all of your resource every other second, and we manage to get back up to full in time for that. Add on to that this fact that you can only really actually scale a single type of damage, and not even just shadow or darkness. I mean, core, skill, sever, shadow, darkness, damage. That is what you scale, nothing else. It's just made it so that the Necromancer skill bar will only ever be one skill that matters, and everything else just says make that skill do more damage. So what I would like to see is just straight up skill deals double damage temper removed entirely, and then add on to all of that Corpse Explosion actually doing damage, Corpse Explosion have legitimate scalers, being able to be used in a build and have it matter, something along those lines. Those are my hopes for the Necro, but that's a lot more like systemic things about the game that I feel like have kind of been designed into a pigeonhole as opposed to necessarily a Necro specific issue. But if we could get Corpse Explosion back on the menu, boys, that would be pretty primo tops for me. All right, we've now been going for a while. We've definitely yapped a bit. We've talked about what's good, we talked about what's bad, what we're excited for, how things are doing. Let's just take 5 minutes. We'll kind of wrap this up here, just so we don't waste too much of people's time. As far as the Necromancer in Diablo 4 is concerned, overall, how do you feel about it? And if you could add one thing that we've seen in the past back into the class, what would it be? And we'll start with Saura.
Overall, I think I feel good because it feels fun that we have builds that does big damage, and it's like one thing that we called out earlier, like Death Trap Rogue clears the screen in seconds, and Sork is the same way. For Necro to feel good in its current state, it needs to hit hard. Otherwise, we have nothing. Like it's just gonna feel horrible. So then we have like good builds that feels impactful, have good buttons, like feels fun to press, and does big damage. So I like that aspect of it, and I am curious what's gonna happen with Overpower because everything is based on Overpower at this point. So like I think it's kind of very expected at some point we're gonna get an Overpower nerf or some kind of a change to that. So I wonder what's gonna happen there, but if anything to add to this class, please, some kind of unstoppable, like unhindered, unstoppable, something we can have, I think would make the experience so much more better. Yeah.
But we have Blood Mist and we have Golem activation. We have two unstoppable options. What are you talking about, Saura? Can you speak on that a little bit more? Maybe people might be confused.
Yeah, so both of them are useless. I don't have Blood Mist on my skill bar anymore. Just put another Darkness skill there and just get more damage. But the problem is a lot of other classes get unstoppable and they can still do things while they're unstoppable.
Yes.
But sadly, when we're unstoppable, we're just a sitting duck waiting for, where maybe I'm picking up blood orbs or I'm trying to relocate myself from a bad situation in the pit, and otherwise I don't even press that button because it's actually a DPS loss and all that stuff. One good thing will be like if you cancel Blood Mist early, which I often do because why stay in it? It's actually not an unstoppable. It's more like a CC breaker, the way it functions. But it would be nice to actually maybe once you cancel it, it gives you remaining unstoppable for a few seconds. But like last season felt great because we had the seasonal power that gave us unhindered, and the pits and gameplay felt so much better on every Necro build just because of it played. But right now, you're slowed so much. The worst thing that happens is you Blood Mist. Right outside of Blood Mist, you're stunned again. So you're like, what's the point? Those are my biggest issues with the class. And if it's our class identity, we're not meant to be that we hit hard, we are slow. Maybe that's the class identity they assign, but there has to be something has to be done there to help the gameplay at least.
There was a long time where we were kind of sold on this idea that's like, well, the Necromancer is slow, but like that's by design. And it's probably the thing I've railed against the most, which is there cannot be a class which is slow by design in an ARPG. ARPGs are not meant to be slow. I could play full tank in Elden Ring and survive a boss hit. You can't. That's my penance for being slow, or the benefit I get. You can't do that in an ARPG. So I already know you don't really feel that with your heart, but it's my biggest sticking point, other than not being able to target with minions. But before I talk over you, Serok,
we already don't have we hit the hardest anymore. Like that's gone. Those days are over, and I don't foresee that being the case. Sure, we did last season again with a Blood Wave, but we're not that class anymore. So the expectation that we're the hardest hitting class now is not really true either. So there does need to be something, and Saura hit the nail on it, right? Like Blood Mist is not an unstoppable. It is, but it's not. It is a CC break. I played Lightning Spear Sork this season, and playing that and seeing that your defensive, while it's a defensive, is also permanent uptime on unstoppable. Really didn't feel good for going back to the Necro. So, the biggest things for changes would be, I'd love to see Shadow come back, but we need something. Even at 200 move speed, it feels terrible as a Necromancer. 200 move speed is like the biggest blessing and curse you can have as a class. Without an unstoppable, because if you get feared, you're running at 200 movement speed in the opposite direction to the door of the pit again. So it just doesn't feel great. So, you know, the whole old mentality of Necro just hits really hard, they can be slow, is not, hey, it's an RPG, so that's not fair. But we're not anymore, and that's not been that way for some time.
Also the slow in the pits. I feel like, I don't know what's the percentage. I feel like I'm slow 90%. That 200 speed does not mean anything. Like I am super slow. Like chilling winds or like snake just taps me and then I'm like this slow effect is on me, lasts forever. It just feels really rough.
Yeah. With the funny part, you might be thinking, well, just put Blood Mist back on your bar, right? But something that people don't necessarily get is when you're trying to pit push, like when you're trying to show the highest potential of a build, part of that is just getting lucky and not getting CC'd. That's just what it comes down to. You need those extra seconds that your DPS would get you. And I think that's probably a pretty good segue into my thing. If you look at the relative strength of the Necromancer, like where is it right now? It's probably one of our healthiest classes as far as what it can accomplish. There are some speed farm builds that get you better at speed farming. With the armory now, it's kind of easy to change into them. When you look at what our builds can output for damage, if our worst builds, ignore Infinimus for a second. Our worst build right now is probably Bloodlance or Blight as far as pit pushing potential is concerned. That means we are currently in the range between pit 85 and pit 112, somewhere around there. Every other build fills in there. Sever does 100, Minions does 102, and then you get up to 112 with Blood Wave and Blood Spear, and everything else is kind of in the middle. That's very healthy. Playing the Necromancer kind of sucks. It's arguably the least fun you can have playing this game if you're also trying to play it optimally. If you're playing a lazy build, you throw Blood Mist on your bar, you use Metamorphosis on your boots, you get infinite unstoppable however you want, you're playing a minion build, you have your golem out. Playing the game casually, pretty fun. Having a good time. You don't really understand why you're not necessarily doing the most damage, but you're having a good time. But everything that makes us better at the things that we do best makes the game less fun to play. Getting stuck in infinite smoke grenades from bandits, the most infuriating thing in this game. Getting slowed and CC'd inside one of them and watching your barrier fall off because you're using Soul Rift, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I guess I'll just die then. Something needs to fundamentally change with the Necromancer to not make every minute of it excruciatingly upsetting and enraging. I know it sounds like very melodramatic, but getting feared into a freeze wall, into 18 lightning pylons, and you don't have Blood Mist available, and even when you do have it on your bar, maybe it's not up. Running to anywhere and just watching some dude who just picked up yellow boots outrun you. The class, I think, is, unless you love it very much, and obviously we do, the most exhausting class to try to excel at because of how unfun it is to play. And that really hit me this season. Pushing on minions, right now doing my leveling for Blight, it occurred to me, I'm triggering Crippling Darkness all the time because it's actually a darkness skill with decent lucky hit chance. So I'm perpetually stunning enemies, so they're unstoppable just more often than they would be on Blood Spear, where Blood Spear, the monsters are at the end of the screen, right? So my Blight Necromancer spends about 50% of the time CC'd, and luckily the majority of my damage is coming from Belial, which I can use while CC'd. And it's really getting to me. It's dragging me down pretty hard, and it's like, oof. All right, I guess I'll build Sever and go do it again, and then I'll build Bloodlance and do it again. So I would really like the class to be reinvestigated for quite literally fun like fun playing the class in content as like my biggest thing. Oh, and give us back revives from Diablo 2. That would also be pretty sick, I think, as far as like things I would like to see come back from different games. That's something I'm on like a big kick about right now, is make minions interesting and not just little guys who I wish I could throw off a glyph half the time. Alrighty. That's basically where we'll go. We have like another minute or two. Is there anything else that people just wanted to throw out there, or just ideas, or what are you working on next, etc.? Kind of free form, whatever you want.
I'll say one more thing about the same topic real quick. Well,
Okay.
Mikuna was playing Bloodwave last season. We were playing a lot, and he was like, "Dude, how do you play this thing? Like, it's so slow, it's so slow." And I told him, "Dude, I never played Sorg. Like, you're coming from Sorg. I never drove Ferrari. I've been driving Toyota over here, not the Toyota. Toyota. Very reliable, but it's like, yeah, I mean, coming from where you're coming from, it's probably feel very slow to you. But yeah, that's something. With that, I don't want like also the CC wise. I don't want CC to be fully ignorable. Like I know a lot of the classes just ignore the CC. I also don't think that's a fun mechanic. So it's like issue is like much deeper than that. Maybe overall
Sure.
the game with the unstoppable. But that's all on my side. Just continue the season. We're gonna work on like Soul Rift, Blood Surge. Gonna try to do some Blood Dance. Enjoy. We have probably a campfire coming up Thursday. So we'll find out about PTR and the new changes, and before we know it, it will be season 9. So
what about you, Sirach? What do you got going on? What are you doing? What are your final thoughts?
So my final thoughts, I think, we've been talking about this for several seasons, many seasons. I think minions really need a true rework. Like the inability for us to control the minions is one of the most infuriating things for this class. So what needs to be done is we definitely need to have some type of targetable or um, some other form of engaging with them. Looking at, we had a discussion this week about druids.
Mm-hmm.
Druids don't even have to have it on their skill bar, and they get to use minions. So what does that mean for necros? I mean, like we're the minion class, and we can't use them. So I think that for me is one big thing for this upcoming. Hoping to see something this season for that. But yeah, I think overall, I think like you said, minions are hands down, or necro hands down is probably the most consistent class we've got. I think in the future there needs to be clearly some things to rework, but overall, I think we're in a great spot.
Yeah. If I were to think about just like last ideas, like you just said, the campfire is right around the corner, which means PTR is right around the corner, which means season 9 is right around the corner. And, obviously, the moment I get out of the PTR, I kind of lose my drive to keep playing the current season because I've already seen what's coming up next. It's kind of a kiss curse there. But it's definitely the most exciting time for me is getting to sit down with the build and going, okay, here's what they're adding. What do we need to change? What do we think is going to be the best? What are the tier lists going to look like? What do we think is going to happen? So that's probably what I'm most excited for, is just getting back into the theory crafting part. Because right now I feel like most things have settled. Like I have some things to change about Blight. I always tend to pick up something when I play a build, like, oh, I'm doing this now instead of that. Overall, if you're a Necro enjoyer, it's probably like the best time you could be playing a Necro right now, even though we kind of just bellyached a lot about it. A lot of that comes down to, elitist pit pushing. If you're not doing that, I think it's a lot more fun to play the class. So maybe I'll try to temper some of my previous comments, no pun intended there. But yeah, I think that's really good. I think season 8 has been a pretty good wrap. I'm excited for season 9. I'd be interested, if you boys have some time, I'd be interested maybe post that chat. We can kind of do a preemptive state of Necromancer for season 9, or at least state of Necromancer walking into the PTR. Maybe we can get that out to the people.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. Because I think we're going to see some maybe expected changes for us, just because of what we talk about in Discord. But I think there's going to be some seriously unexpected thing from the masses that are going to show up in season 9. So I think that's probably a good idea.
All right, well then we'll go ahead here. Just give yourself a quick sign off. Just remind the people who you are. I swear I'll learn how to point. Just remind the people who you are, what you got going on, and then we'll go ahead and sign off. Saura?
yeah, LordxSaura, short Saura, a lot more videos. Hopefully, PTR coverage. I'll try to pit push in PTR a little bit more, and then go from there. Excited for I think season 9. YouTube, Twitch. Maybe I'll live stream one of these days.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
You gotta let the people see your face. Right now, you're just the emblem. We gotta
That's
get
right.
the rest of you out there too.
Yeah, this is one of those rare moments I show my face, so maybe we'll do that more.
Hey chat, real quick, or I guess YouTube, whoever's watching this. I think LordxSaura low-key looks like Mark Ruffalo. That was the first thing I thought when I first saw Saura. So whenever you're thinking of the Incredible Hulk playing Bloodwave just like a Saura, I think it's very funny. What about yourself, Seroc?
Green filter.
Yeah, well, this is Seroc. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. I'm definitely looking forward to PTR. And you can catch me on Twitch for PTR in Season 9. And thanks again for hanging out with us.
And Seroc has an absolutely adorable new puppy dog. So if you want to see somebody play the Necromancer at a high level, but also there's a dog there, it's probably the best place on Twitch to be able to find it. Do we get to see the dog? Are you going to get him?
Do. Oh, she's coming to me.
Oh, let's go. Everybody, this is the most important thing. I'm a millennial. Look at that baby. That's a good dog. That is like National Geographic. This is what a good dog looks like.
She's a good dog. She's a good dog.
Alrighty, yeah, and I guess I'm MacroBioBoi. I'm this everywhere. And yes, it's BioBoi. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you, but MacroBio was already taken, just kind of like LordxSaura. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging out. This has been the State of the Necromancer from your boys over at MaxRoll. Shoutouts to Seroc and Saura for taking the time to make this happen. I appreciate y'all. And then, like we said, look forward to maybe one of these coming again after the Season 9 PTR or a little bit beforehand, once we get a better sense of like what the patch notes look like and what the expected changes are. We can kind of digest it and then get that information out to you so you can get a little bit of a sneak peek of what to expect. Thank you so much for watching this. I really, really hope that this helped you to better enjoy the Necromancer in Diablo 4, and we'll see you in the next video.